All right. And he is right. It is a protection ride. When you get the US president goes to Europe and says, hey, you're going to buy my gas. You're going to buy gas from us, not the Russians. And you're going to pay us 5 times more than what you were paying the Russians for it. Oh, and by the way, you're also now going to pay 5% for NATO. If you want us to be involved, if you want protection from the Russians who we've agitated, who has a 1 million man military now, you are going to buy protection from us. And it's now going to be at 5%. And you question, okay, well, why does the US care so much about Europe investing 5% into NATO? They care because what they call defense is effectively buying weapons, arms, and who are they going to get them from? 70% or more are going to come from us. So not only are you going to pay a markup for the energy that, by the way, we got you to pass those sanctions in order to cut yourself off from Russian energy. So thanks for that. Now you're going to pay us 5 times more. And on top of paying us 5 times more, you're also going to buy 5% increase in the amount that you're putting into NATO, which again, thank you for the money, which is going to come into the weapons that you're effectively buying from us. You can see it's somewhat of a pattern here, right? That there's money flowing out of Europe into the United States. And you can imagine that a president knows that, which is the reason why he's telling them, you're going to buy your oil from us, or your gas from us, your energy from us, and you're going to buy your weapons from us. Full stop. It's a racket. It's a racket. And it does put you in the mind of a Tony Soprano type move that Donald Trump is going with. And, you know, you would think that European leaders would know that. Like in the same way that we're using Ukraine as this kind of tip of the spear to go after the Russians, Europe will be used in the same fashion. They're no better in our way of looking at those things. Europe has been getting financially devalued. And we've been reaping the benefits of it. I mean, it was last year, I believe, where Stoltenberg came out and said Europe is a garden. Okay, fair enough. How do you think you got that garden? And now that you've been in this war and the amount that you're paying for energy has dramatically increased, are you going to be able to maintain that garden? When Macron came out to Joe Biden and said, well, wait a minute, Joe, aren't we in this together? And what he meant was for the energy thing. Why are you charging so much for this energy? Aren't we in this together? And of course, Joe Biden's response is, no, we are not. Service station is over there. Pay what we tell you to pay. Thank you very much. Does Europe even have a seat at the table in regards to the conversations that are taking place on an international stage? Russia doesn't go to Europe when it wants to have a conversation. It wants to have a conversation with the US about European security. Think about that. Europe is not really part of the conversation about European security. Russia wants to have the conversation with Joe Biden about the expansion of NATO, or for that matter, conversation with Donald Trump. I'm just pointing out that it is mind-blowing that Europe is not a part of the main conversation about European security. That conversation is had with the United States, the country that is not in Europe. Something has gone monstrously wrong with these bureaucrats in Europe in the way that they basically led that continent. It's just wild, just utterly wild. One of the other things that are taking place, Garland Nixon is going to be coming up in a moment. Always love talking to Garland. And look, as I think has been clear, that people have been very cautious about accepting this idea that Donald Trump is coming in and is somehow going to force Netanyahu to the peace table. When you look at the deal, it does make it clear that Netanyahu can reinvigorate or restart that war anytime he wants. And you can imagine that the US, who's been transparently biased and completely obsequious to the will of Netanyahu as he prosecuted this genocide, you can imagine that the Trump administration is going to look and say, hey, they shot that baby, but I think that baby was carrying a 9mm. And so, you know, that troop had the right to defend itself when he murdered that baby. They're going to say stuff like that. Or that valiant soldier killed that 8-year-old as that 8-year-old was running away from a drone. They're going to say stuff like this, and they're going to say it with a straight face. And so there is a huge amount of skepticism about this idea that Trump is pushing Netanyahu into a deal. By the same token, Trump did say he wanted to end wars, not start them. So, but let's go to my guests. We are joined, the man of the hour, Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon is a political analyst. Garland, I really need to adjust this. I would say political analyst, but you haven't. Have you started another show yet, or are you starting another show recently? I mean, I know you have your own YouTube channel, but are you on radio or any other media that I need to report from?
Yeah, well, I'm on WPFW 89.3 FM every Friday from 6 to 7 p.m. So, but yeah, political analyst. You know, and I became a political analyst. I was working at a small radio radio station, and I went to the owner and I said, "Hey, can I get a card made that says Garland Nixon, senior political analyst?" And he said, "Sure." And I got a business card made, and that's how I became a senior political analyst. Kind of like the Wizard of Oz, when all the guy needed was a degree. There you go.
Man, you have been fantastic at this. Don't say yourself too short on this. Political analyst, senior political analyst, either one, you've been damn good at it. So yes, I'm going to go with political analyst. Also, YouTube channel. What is the name of that channel, by the way? Is it just Garland Nixon?
Yeah, people just look up my name.
Okay, just Garland Nixon. So definitely check him out on YouTube. The man does fantastic work. He is the one that got me on the radio. I have loved his analysis. I guess for the several years, I thought to myself, why am I doing this when Garland Nixon exists? That's how good you are at this. So no, man, I am always deeply appreciative for you to join me on my show. I really am. So Joe Biden and Blinken have been doing their "Look How Great We Are" tour. Look how great America is tour. And this comes across as deeply delusional to me. I mean, for one, the crisis in Ukraine and that catastrophe by itself is humiliating. But Joe Biden is considering this some kind of win. He also said this about China, which again seems to be completely delusional to me. But again, this is one second. But this is what they're running with. So this is Biden. Listen to what he says here, and I want to get your take on this. One second. I played the clip earlier about Joe Biden talking about the $1.3 trillion that apparently the United States spent. And he's saying this as if it's some kind of a good thing. Listen to what he says about China.
That will not happen. Now, according to the latest, that will not happen. Now, according to the latest predictions on China's current course, they will never surpass us. Period. I met one-on-one with President Xi in consequential summits. He and I have always been direct and straightforward with each other. I made it clear we expect China and everyone to abide by the international rules. And so we stood up against unfair trade practices, taking action when China dumps subsidized goods, incredibly subsidized, on our markets to undercut our workers.
He's out of his goddamn mind. China would never surpass us. What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? Like, if you think of China has 3 to 4 times the size of the United States, literally, and from the standpoint of population. If you talk about industrial base, how does he expect the U.S. to ever compete with a country that is 3 to 4 times our size and has the ability to industrialize that country? Give me a take on this. I mean, I know he has mental and cognitive issues. Is that what we're saying here? Cognitive lapse?
No, I think what we're seeing is the practices of the Biden administration. I mean, think about, and the Democratic Party as a whole, that's where they are now. Think about the election. People were, everyday people, ordinary people were saying, hey, I'm struggling. The prices are too high. Prices have gone up and my salaries haven't gone up commensurate with the prices. So times are difficult. What are you going to do? And the answer was the economy's great. All you have to do is go to our website. We got pie charts and graphs all over the place that'll show you just how wonderful the economy is. You know what I mean? So it's like, hey, my stomach's hurting. No, your stomach's not hurting. Can you imagine if you went to the doctor? Hey, my knee's bothering you. No, your knee's great. It's never felt better. It is simply right. Long ago there was a book written by, I forgot who it was, Al Franken, called Rush Limbaugh is a Big Fat Idiot, right?
It was The Lying Lies and the Liar Liars that tell them. I have that book. It was damn
Yeah.
good, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, the first one was funnier though. The
Yeah.
Red Symbols of it was hilarious book, right? But my point was in that one of the things that he talked about was a person who's apathetic about the truth, not a liar. There's a difference. And what he basically explained, and I never forgot that, who simply says whatever they need to say. If it
Mhm.
happens to be true, it's not that they're deliberately lying. It's irrelevant whether or not it's true or false. If it happens to be true,
That amoral to the truth, right?
right, exactly. Blinken and so these guys just say Russia's weak or Russia's losing, this country's losing. China, they have nothing, they're impoverished. They're, Russia's fighting with shovels, and Africa loves us. The things have never been better in the Middle East. It doesn't matter if it's true. The problem is, at some point, those kinds of statements run into reality. And
Yep.
one of the times they ran into reality was November 5th. And they got crushed. And they're, more and more, the base of the Democratic Party is kind of looking at them like, come on, guys, you got to tell us something we want to hear. And they're like, no, we'll just make things up and throw it at you. And the world now is happy to see the back end of the Biden administration as they exit, because people want at some point a realistic conversation. If I go to the doctor, here's the reality. I want the doctor to tell me, Garland, you're going to have to get that leg cut off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to hear everything's going to be fine. Tell me the truth. Then I can think about it. What is my plan? I can work. You know what I mean? If I go to my car, I want the guy to tell me the truth. I think you're going to have to get a new engine, or your transmission. I once had a guy tell me your transmission's another 20 or 30,000 miles. That's gone. Good. Don't tell me everything's fine.
Yeah.
Because then I can plan on how to get a new transmission. And so that's all they do. They're totally apathetic. They live in the world of narratives. They make up a narrative, and that's good enough.
I agree with you. It's astonishing to me that he will make that statement, but maybe it shouldn't be all that astonishing to me. I mean, speaking of other statements that are coming out of the Middle East, there is a report that came out yesterday that a lot of people are talking about, and I want to get your take on. So they are this. And people are rightly to be skeptical of this, considering for the last year, Joe Biden has said, well, we're ending the war. We have a peace deal. A peace deal is around the corner. We're seconds away from a deal. And to back up your point on this, if you remember during, I believe it was the DNC convention, Joe Biden came out for the first day. And then at that point, he was invisible since. But when he came out the first day, the expectation was that they sent Blinken to the Middle East because they wanted to get a deal just before the inauguration, even if the deal was going to fall apart immediately after. They wanted to be able to say, see, we finally got you a deal. We've been working tirelessly for this deal, and we finally got you a deal. Because they wanted to make it look good for when Kamala Harris was effectively doing her nomination, to make it look like the Biden administration was doing something. Because what they knew was that a large contingent of their base hated the fact that they were backing a genocide. And that regardless of how often Kamala Harris or any other Democrat would say, hey, you shouldn't care about the fact that we're backing and paying for a genocide, the public did care, which is why you have millions of people who just didn't show up for the race. And many of those people were in the younger demographic. All right. So this comes out. Trump's Middle East envoy forced Netanyahu to accept a Gaza deal he repeatedly rejected. Now, that is mind-blowing. And because what it gets across is something that Jack Lew was saying. Jack Lew is ambassador for the United States towards Israel. In the article in, I believe it was the Times of Israel, he points out that at no point did the Biden administration push Netanyahu into anything. Like, so all of this talk that was coming out, oh, Joe Biden is working behind the scenes. Joe Biden is trying to get Netanyahu to do this. That wasn't really happening at all. It was just bluster that they were putting out for public consumption. So people have a right to be so skeptical when they see an article pointing out that Donald Trump is effectively forcing Netanyahu into a deal. But I give a little bit of credence to it because of what I consider to be Donald Trump's ego. I don't necessarily see Donald Trump as being willing to accept a humiliating position, even for the likes of Netanyahu. And if it's something where over and over again, like Joe Biden, where it was that Netanyahu just seemingly took every opportunity to humiliate Joe Biden as a president, I don't see Trump accepting that. Give me your take on this, though. And one other thing, If it's true, it shows how weak and feckless Joe Biden was. That if Joe Biden was willing to apply even the little amount of pressure, that he could have actually stopped this genocide, considering we were paying 70 to 80% for the genocide to take place. Give me your take on this. Do you give any credence to the article? That's the first point. And the second point, if it's true, what does it say about the Biden administration?
Two things. That article aligns exactly with what I believe and what I've been arguing. The Biden administration, I would argue something different. Not that they're weak and feckless. They're the opposite. They are telling Israel what to do. Let's not forget, the Israelis bombed, I forgot, it was one of these UN, schools or something, right?
Right.
And everybody in the world was like, that's terrible. The UN was like, that's terrible. And they came out and said, Anthony Blinken was at a meeting and he approved that target. And everybody went, oop, right? And my argument is they could have did it every time because Anthony Blinken approved all of the targets. That what we have here is the United States, hate to overuse this word, plausible deniability. That's what Israel is. Israel did not do anything that Joe Biden and Blinken didn't, and Sullivan didn't want them to do. Israel, they sit in, just like that happened with that targeting. They sit in a room and they come together. What are you going to do? We're going to drop a bomb on a bunch of tents and burn people alive. All right, great job. We're going to go out and pretend we don't know anything about it. High five, boom, and off they go. You do your job. You slaughter million innocent people, and then I do my job and I go on TV and say, I don't understand why Israel's doing that. We're trying, but they just won't listen to us.
Yep.
We're giving them their money. We're giving them the bombs. That we're giving them everything. They don't exist without us. We're covering them in the UN. We're covering them in illegal. Well, let's get rid of TikTok because people are criticizing Israel. So we're going to do everything to make sure Israel can commit a genocide and give them everything they can commit a genocide. And then we're going to say we can't stop them from committing a genocide. How absurd is that? Let's not forget, Ronald Reagan comes to office and says, and you're probably familiar with this story, hey, they're bombing Beirut. We need to tell the Israelis to stop. And he's told by his advisor, just call them and tell them to stop. And he's like, I can do that. Yeah, they'll listen to you. He calls them, hey, stop. They're like, okay. And he was like, I didn't know I could do that.
I didn't know I could do that.
The truth. You can always do that. They will do what they're told to do. It would be like me saying, my hand here, it's doing terrible things. It's punching people. It's choking people. But for some reason, I won't listen. I try to reason with it. It won't listen. It's my hand. That's all Israel is. It is an appendage. It is a political and military tool. Joe Biden said, and if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to create it to address our interest in the region. It is a tool to address and they've lied all along. And the second Donald Trump came in, he did what Reagan did. Hey, cut it out. And Israel like, oh crap, okay.
Yeah,
I don't want you to do that. Well, if you don't want us to do it, you kind of run the country. We can't do it. Joe Biden's like, and it puts a lie to all this argument. We're working with the Israelis to do this. You don't need to work with them. I don't need to work with my hand. I just need to stop it from punching people because it's my hand. And so now what's going to be interesting too is going into the Trump administration, the Democrats are in a difficult position. Because what are they going to say? Everything, because they've been reflexively opposed to anything that Donald Trump does, right? So Donald Trump says, oh, I kind of want to end the genocide. What are the Democrats going to do? No, don't end the genocide. If he says, hey, I kind of want to end this war. Oh, my God, we got to stop him. It's a terrible dictator, evil thing to do to stop the Ukraine. Now, what are the Democrats really going to? I mean, to me, here are their options. They can oppose Donald Trump reflexively, everything he does, which means opposing his attempt to stop the genocide or opposing his attempt to stop the Ukraine war, which means now they're just the party of John Bolton. And their base doesn't want it to happen. So they're going to push back against their base. They're going to push back against all the people who don't want the Ukraine war to go down. So ultimately, what we have is this. Do they just now, if they go along with Donald Trump, then what does that show? That they could have done it all along, but they don't want to. Things are bad for the Democrats, but I think they're going to get worse when Donald Trump gets in because they got to decide whether they are pure pro-war and they're going to fight Donald Trump tooth and nail when in fact everybody knows the American people are always in favor of ending a war. And in fact, the election, he went in a blowout and he said, I'm going to end the wars. If he does, and if one last thing, what happens if a month, 2 months, 3 months down the line, the Ukraine conflict is over, the Israeli conflict or whatever is the volumes turned down on that? Man, the Democrats are going to be looking bad. And you think Donald Trump has an approval rating now? I'm not saying I'm pro-Trump. I'm not.
No,
I'm,
I know.
far to the left of all. I'm just saying, from my perspective as an analyst, if this guy comes in and stops these wars in a couple of months, man, the Democratic Party.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Because you have to give him his credit.
I often find myself in that kind of weird spot too, where I have to be like, look, I'm not pro-Trump, but I am against these wars. And if you have a situation where the president comes in and does what he says, I'm going to end wars, not start them, then you got to give the man his due, right? Like, it's not that he's going to be great across the board. There's going to be all sorts of domestic stuff that I'm going to be, I'm going to, I hate completely with every fiber of my being. But if you're telling me a war that is guiding a catastrophe that never needed to take place, that is a Democratic project at this point. I mean, because the Democratic Party have clinched onto this war and have stood and fought for this war, standing beside in alignment with Joe Biden. I know the Republicans are too, especially the Orthodox Republicans. But from the standpoint of MAGA, I'm going to stop this war. This is not my war. I'm going to end it. I'm going to kill it. And you get 500,000 people that died for no reason. Yes, I'm going to back him and stop this war. I think it's a good thing. But he told those Muslims when he was running for office, I want to end that war in the Middle East. That's what he told them, flat out. Now, he could be lying to them. He could be. But he also could be telling them the truth because, like people said, it took Nixon to go to China. And I don't believe, though, it took Trump to end the war. Joe Biden could have done it early on. There was nothing to stop Joe Biden from saying, this ends or you get no more support from us. At that point, It would end. It would end. How could they keep it going? I mean, they were giving political support in the United Nations. I mean, even shameless, transparent lying. So, for example, you remember when they passed the UN Security Council resolution for ceasefire, and I believe it was sociopath Matt Miller, when asked, was like, well, this is a non-binding resolution. Like, what do you mean it's non-binding? It's a resolution by the UN Security Council. What do you mean it's non-binding? Well, what he meant was it's non-binding because we now say it's non-binding. We're not going to enforce it. We're not going to back it. So yeah, it's non-binding for us. I agree with you, man. I hope he does stick to this. And I agree with you too, that he does clearly, as a US president, have the capability of saying, this stops or else. Or else.
That changed the game. If he does that, right? If what we see is true, if he just said, cut it out, guys, and they said, okay, darn. Can any president ever again say that I can't do that? See, that's the other part. Part of the game in the U.S., I think, is that Israel does the dirty work, and that's their job behind closed doors, good cop, bad cop in a kind of twisted way. And the U.S. comes out and says, oh, we can't get them to stop. They won't listen to us. Oh, rats. And we're working with them, but they're not reasonable, blah, blah, blah. If Donald Trump just comes in and says, hey, I start next Monday. I want this thing over by then. And they say, okay, yes, sir. Can any president ever again say, I can't control the Israelis? It becomes obvious. And as you said, you made a good point. Donald Trump is a guy who, sees himself as the strong man, the right-wing strong man. And I'm not saying that in a pejorative, negative, or positive term. That's his view of himself. I'm in charge, darn it. I'm the CEO. I'm the boss. To him, this is the way he operates. I'm going to tell you to cut it out and you better. And if he sees the dynamic where he has that power dynamic, he's going to use it. And he wants everybody around to know that Donald Trump, not only is he going to tell them to do it, he wants everybody to know that he's the one that I'm the one that did that. I told them and they listened to me. You know what I mean? Which kind of screws the establishment in the future because they, like you said, they've been playing the weak game. We're just too weak to stop them. Donald Trump has proven if this happens, hasn't he proven that to be a lie? In one day, the last 16 months, he's proven every bit of it to be a lie.
He is not even in office. He's not even in office. Like he is. I'm fascinated by it because I've never seen anything like it in a modern, let's say, orthodoxy of the way power typically works. I mean, Joe Biden has receded into the background. Donald Trump is supposedly coming into office. Well, he will be coming into office, but as he's coming into office, all of this stuff is changing around him, and he hasn't even taken power yet. And so it's like, okay, so he's supposed to be having a talk with Putin about not even about just the war, but about European structure in general, basically the organization of Europe and how power is accrued in Europe and how the lines are drawn in Europe, which again is pretty astonishing because we're talking about Europe and we're talking about a US president that on some level is going to decide European security and European architecture. But then in the other front, the issue of Israel. And so we are 4 or 5 days away from getting in the office of Trump, and he is already shifting the geopolitical landscape. It's I've never seen anything like it. Have you ever seen this before? I mean, like you say, he's a strong man and his self-conception of himself. And as a strong man, he wants to be able to show, I am dictating this and I am dictating that. And on the major issues of the war in Ukraine, or for that matter, the war in Israel, it seems that he is indeed dictating those things. It's astonishing to me. There's something else too. Jeffrey Sachs. So Donald Trump on his own Truth Social account put up the video of Jeffrey Sachs calling Netanyahu a deep, dark son of a bitch. I'm going to play this clip, just a little bit of it so the audience can see what I'm referring to, because it's pretty astonishing that he would play something like this if indeed Netanyahu and Trump are as close as they are, and if indeed Trump is going to be as obsequious to Netanyahu as he is. What the hell is this doing on Donald Trump's Truth Social account?
The war in Syria, and you may actually hear from grown-up reporters who are lying through their teeth or ignorant beyond imagining that, oh, the war in Syria, yes, Russia intervened in Syria. Well, do you know that that Obama tasked the CIA to overthrow the Syrian government starting 4 years before Russia intervened? What kind of nonsense is that? And how many times did the New York Times report on Operation Timber Sycamore, which was the presidential order to the CIA to overthrow Bashar al-Assad? 3 times in 10 years. This is not democracy. This is a game. And it's a game of narrative. Why did the U.S. invade Iraq in 2003? Well, first of all, it was completely phony pretenses. It wasn't, oh, we were so wrong, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. They actually did focus groups in the fall of 2002 to find out what would sell that war to the American people. Abe Shulsky, if you want to know the name of the PR genius. They did focus groups on the war. They wanted the war all the time. They had to figure out how to sell the war to the American people, how to scare the shit out of the American people. Had from 1995 onward the theory that the only way we're going to get rid of Hamas and Hezbollah is by toppling the governments that support them. That's Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And the guy's nothing if not obsessive. And he's still trying to get us to fight Iran this day, this week. He's a deep, dark son of a bitch. Sorry.
I think that was the point of that part. If this is what it seems, and I want to get your take on it, if it's what it seems, it's this notion that Netanyahu has been intensively getting us into conflicts, or at the very least trying to get us in the various conflicts, especially in the context of presidents that he may be able to manipulate. And Trump putting this out on some level is it's like, look, man, I'm going to end wars, not start them. And yet there's a pressure campaign on me to go into Iran. Now, if you remember, I believe it was Axios and many of the other publications was reporting that Joe Biden, at the end of his presidency, was considering military strikes on Iran. And that Donald Trump also was getting the same sort of pressure with this idea that, well, Iran can break out and get a bomb in 2 days. And so we need to attack their military capabilities right now. We need to do it now. We don't have any time to do it. We got to do it now. And they were putting this on Joe Biden and also putting this on Donald Trump. So I don't think it's coincidental that this gets put out on Truth Social at the exact same time where there seems to be this pressure campaign in the media and behind the scenes of getting Trump to hit Iran. Now, I could be wrong on this. This could just be me putting these two things together that may be unrelated. But give me your take on this, because I haven't necessarily had a good framing of why this would end up on Trump's Truth Social.
I agree with you. I think that that was in some ways a response to this discussion about, is Trump going to attack Iran? And we're hearing people, oh, Trump, as soon as he gets in, he's going to do the same thing. He'll start a war. He'll attack Iran. And I thought to myself, Donald Trump's going to come in and start damn near World War III within the first couple. That'll be it for his administration. They're not going to be able to do anything domestically anywhere after that. What happens if that thing spins out of control? Iran hits U.S. bases, knocks out the oil infrastructure, the entire Western economy collapses, and 2 months into Donald Trump's administration, where it looks like a zombie apocalypse in America. Donald Trump ain't buying that. So I think that we get a couple of things. The first thing that I thought was this. I heard Dr. Sachs say he was calling all the people at the White House. He was calling Biden and all these people, and they wouldn't take his calls. I think Donald Trump's taking his calls, whether it's unofficially, which if Sachs called the Biden people, he called the Trump people, and I think they took his calls. And even if they didn't, which I think they did, that's kind of an informal advisor status right there, because he's listening to what the guy says.
Yeah.
And this is real. I mean, this is so opposite of what we were talking about before. The Biden people, things are wonderful. We're going to defeat China. We're doing good things around the world. We're standing for democracy, blah, 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 right? And Donald Trump's putting something out that is the cold, stone, hard truth about America. It reminds me of when they said, oh, these people are evil or whatever, and Trump said, we're no angels. It is an admission that the United States, that the neocons, who Donald Trump appears to hate, and I understand that because they tried to kill him, and some people believe they've tried to destroy him for the last 8 years. I think he does hate him, and I think he hates Zelensky. I think he hates people that he has a legitimate reason to hate because they tried to destroy him. And I think that he just has a different vision. Now, like we said, when it comes to Cuba and Venezuela and stuff, we're going to be infuriated at him. No question. But I do think that when it comes to this whole World War III thing and domination, and of course, and this is important, just flat out lying to the American people. This is why we're doing this, and this is why we're doing that, because this guy's a dictator or that guy's a whatever, and we're trying to save this country and give them democracy. I don't think Donald Trump's into that crap. I think he's more like, look, this is what we're doing. This is what we're not doing. This is why. I listened to that also. Doesn't that make it a little tougher for the Senate to go after Tulsi Gabbard with the whole, well, you talked to Assad. Well, wait a minute. Trump's already coming out and saying, we overthrew the damn government of Assad. You know what I mean? Look what we did in Syria. So now if they go after, they open that can of worms for discussion. So, sure, there's things about Tulsi I don't like, but I put it like that. I'd sure as hell take her over Avril Haines.
Yes.
Or anybody in the debate. I'm not saying she's great. I'm saying I would take her over anybody in the Biden administration.
Agreed. I mean, she was one of those people, like, very rarely do I care about political appointments. I know, who a person appoints is on some way, people of policy, right? Who a person appoints is on some way going to give some kind of context to their policy. So yes. And, nobody's perfect. So fair enough, putting all of that into it. I prefer Tulsi Gabbard's foreign policy chops. I mean, her willingness to go and talk to Assad, her willingness to point out we need to stop these wars. These are regime change wars that are not doing anything for America. That is a positive thing. That is a good thing. Yes, she's a lunatic on the issue of Israel. And yes, there's some things that she would say, especially these drone wars, that I don't particularly like. But she is very rare in the political space. Democrats hate her guts because she had the temerity to run in the presidential race and was willing to put a knife in Hillary Clinton, or for that matter, put a knife in Kamala Harris.
She supported Bernie.
Yeah,
and supported Bernie.
That's the other thing.
That's why she walked away. She was for Bernie.
Yeah, and they hate her guts for it. They hate her guts for it. And so now they're trying to torpedo her nomination for the Director of National Intelligence. I hope she gets into that position. RFK also. I hope he gets into that position. I agree. I back both of them in the positions that they're trying to get put into. Ratcliffe also. He was one of those people who was willing to give an honest assessment on the UFO stuff. So I support him for that.
Cash Patel. A lot of things I don't like about
So,
Cash Patel, but if somebody says I don't trust the FBI and we need to investigate him,
I agree with
I'm
him.
for that. It gets back to what Frederick Douglass said. I'll join any man to do good and no man to do evil. Well, I'm paraphrasing. I don't know exactly how he put it, but the point being, now, particularly after looking at 4 years of the Biden administration, you got to kind of look at it a little bit more transactionally and say the person that's in there. For instance, I got to be frank. I wanted Trump to win.
Yeah.
I wanted Trump to win because I felt like if Kamala Harris wins, we're all dead within 6 months to a year of a nuclear. I may have been wrong, but that was my belief. So should I say I don't want Trump to win? I'd rather die in a nuclear holocaust? No. And I think that's something that changed my mentality too, or helped to adjust it to say, you know what? I really have to start thinking like Frederick Douglass and look and say, okay, yes, I can evaluate the system as crashing as a whole, or capitalism or neoliberalism or all these kinds of things. But in the immediacy, I got to look and say, who would I rather have, this person or that person, when we're talking about such existential issues as nuclear war and even in Gaza, the genocide. That's not me. It's not here. But my empathy for these people, innocent people, has to say, what?
I agree with you.
You know what? If Donald Trump stops the genocide, if he stops that genocide and he stops the war, I will have to come out and say I should have voted for him. I have to say that. If all the other thing notwithstanding, if he stops both of those, I will have to say, you know what? I didn't vote for him, but I probably should have. All the other crap is coming, but those two things were two of the worst things I've seen in my lifetime.
God, I agree with you so much because I didn't vote for Trump. I didn't vote for either, to be honest. I think I wrote in Jill Stein. But I looked at it and thought to myself, I did not want Harris to win. I could say I didn't want either to win, but again, it's a political system, right? Somebody's going to win. I didn't want her to win. And, a lot of these Democrats, when they're talking about why they want Harris, foreign policy doesn't factor into it at all. And for me, foreign policy was one of the main reasons, because I thought she's going to get us all killed. Just like I thought Joe Biden potentially was going to get us all killed. She doesn't know what she's doing in regards to foreign policy. She just latching on to whatever this kind of stuff that Joe Biden went with. Democrats are rabid and unrealistic on all notions of foreign policy, and Europe has jumped in on this nonsense bandwagon. So yeah, I had serious concerns about the Democratic Party's capability of running in the race, whereas the other guy was like, I'm going to end the war. A war that, depending upon the metrics, like 1 million people have been killed or damaged in some major way. And the Democrats are like, yeah, we need to now get them to bring in their kids into the conflict. We need 18-year-olds to fight. Whereas the other one was like, we need to end this war. Full stop. We need to end the war. And again, for the Israeli one too, where Trump is like, I'm going to end that war in Gaza also. I'm going to end that war. So you're talking about a situation where hundreds of thousands of people have lost their lives. Full stop. And one person is going to keep it going, whereas the other one saying they're going to end it. Now, as you point out, he could be lying about it. I don't get the sense he is, though. At the very least, not for the Ukraine one. I get the sense that he considers that to be Joe Biden's war. And so he doesn't necessarily feel attached to it in the way that some of the other presidents might be attached to it. So I agree with you on that. The issue is domestic policy, where, obviously he's going to increase taxes. He's going to decrease taxes on the rich. He's going to inflate the budget. There's going to be all sorts of negative things associated with it. But when you bring in foreign policy into it and you make it existential, where it looks like one party is going to end the world and the other party at the very least seems to be aware that the larger world exists and maybe we shouldn't necessarily have it in a case of hellfire, then yeah, that's what you get, right? And so, I feel like John Wayne, we say he's my president. I didn't vote for him, but I hope he does well. I feel that way. I hope he does well. And you take the wins where you get them. If you can get a Tulsi Gabbard in, great. If you can get an RFK Jr. in for the healthcare thing, great. And the reason why I said RFK Jr., we spend trillions of dollars more per year than anywhere else on healthcare, and we die like 10 years younger. There's something wrong with that. And that's a food issue, I would argue. That's a corporations being able to maximize their profit off of our health expense. Whether it's health insurance companies or for that matter, whether that's sugar in all of our foods, high fructose corn syrup, all of that stuff. That stuff is problematic.
Can I throw something else at you real quick
Please.
on that video before we leave it?
Yeah.
And you know what I wonder? I don't know. Did Trump individually decide, because you know how things are in politics, to just, oh, hey, I found this video, I'm going to put it, or were there people in
Around
his inner circle talking, how are we going to address this? People are saying we need to do something. And somebody said, well, this video is a little over. What do you think? Let's go with it. You know what I mean? That Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr., who apparently is a close confidant, some of his people might have got to talking, you know.
They have, by the way. I know it for a fact they have. So Alexander McCurry apparently pointed out that RFK Jr. gave him like a shout out.
Yes.
Now, yeah.
And
so
one other person, I think there's another person he mentioned. There's two people in the Biden administration, I mean, in the Trump administration, potentially, that said they listened to the Duran. Hey, if you listen to the Duran, you're going to be okay.
Exactly. That was my thinking too. I was like, if RFK Jr., who's tight with Trump and right beside Trump, is listening to Alexander McCarris, okay, that's mind-blowing. Right? That is super mind-blowing. Alexander McCarris used to come on Fault Lines.
Yes.
All the time.
You know what? Also, it's demonstrating something else, the power of social media. Right now, you or I or whoever, you look and you see 1,000 views, 2,000 views, 300 views, 10,000 views, whatever. But within those views, you don't know who's watching. You don't know that somebody somewhere who's in a very powerful position could be sitting there like, oh, hold on, wait a minute. Jamal Thomas is on. I never miss his show. You don't know. That's possible. And probably even likely that people who you would never suspect are watching your show. The power of alternative media is growing exponentially. People are leaving MSNBC, Fox, all that crap, and they're going to listen to people like us. We have no idea. And if they're watching Duran, that ain't all they're watching, most likely. They're watching some other things. So I think alternative media, which is a realistic point of view, which is the point of view of the ordinary man and woman, is having an influence on politics and policy. That truly is democracy, isn't it?
I agree with you, which is why they're trying to get rid of TikTok. It is precise reason why they're trying to get rid of TikTok. Like, they don't. And honestly, that they got rid of us. Like, the TikTok thing is not that far removed from them getting rid of RT Sputnik in the way they did this kind of in-run around the First Amendment to do so. Like, I got to be honest, I'm still salty about that. Like,
I'm furious.
I'm shocked. Like, because usually, you interact with your government in this kind of distant way. You don't really, the idea that the government gets engaged in a way that goes after you directly is kind of hard to wrap your head around, especially being just an ordinary person. I'm not a celeb. I'm not anything else. I'm just a guy. And so to have the government to say what you're saying is so subversive to us in our power set that we need to get rid of you, it's mind-blowing. That is a mind-blowing thing. And they're doing effectively the same thing to TikTok, a company that has like 700 billion.
How about this?
Million
170 million users in the US, almost exactly
half the
half of the
population.
United States. And if you think about the under 30 population, it's probably got, 70% of them. And they're already furious at the Democrats. And, they're mad at them. And now you're going to get rid of their favorite app. I mean, it's just madness. And we see over and over again that the people who are in favor of it are just coming out and saying or writing op-eds that it's because of Zionism. That's why it's gone, because people are on there saying things that the Zionists didn't like. They got rid of it. I'm hoping that Donald Trump will revive it again, which I'll put it like, think about this. If he saves TikTok and stops,
he called on them to stop it, by the way, because Kellyanne Conway ended up being a foreign asset. Right. She had to register for FARA, but she was registering in order to effectively be an advocate, a lobbyist for TikTok. And so Trump had called on TikTok to not be banned, effectively told the Supreme Court to have basically a stay on it. Who knows if they're going to do it? I'm sorry, Garland, I jumped in on you.
I'll just say this, that imagine, the guy comes in and he ends the one or two of the conflicts or takes action and make an attempt to. He works on getting rid of them, and he saves TikTok. a lot of the traditional constituencies that have supported the Democrats, many of whom voted for Trump or stayed home, he's going to solidify his grip on them. They're going to look at the Democrats and say, you guys are idiots and you hate us and you don't think anything about us. Thanks, Trump. He's going to make them look good.
By the way, that's the danger for Democrats. That is the danger for Democrats. Like, do you remember when Boris Johnson was running against Jeremy Corbyn? And Jeremy Corbyn, his own party was putting a knife in him, guy. Like his own party was sabotaging him all the way through that election. But you got to a point where Boris Johnson was making this argument: I'm for freedom, I'm for justice, I believe in Brexit. The public said they wanted to leave, so damn it, I'm going to leave. Now that argument allowed him to take this kind of lane of I believe in freedom and justice and democracy, and the public voted, so damn it, we're going to do what the public said. Whereas Jeremy Corbyn, who was a Brexiteer early on, by the way, meaning he was a Brexiteer, but he couldn't say it because his party wouldn't allow him to say it. So he just decided, I'm not going to take a vote on this. I'm going to stand aside on this. So the most important election in his time period, Jeremy Corbyn wouldn't take a step, like I wouldn't take a position on, despite the fact that the man was a Brexiteer early on. Jeremy Corbyn got crushed. And when I say crushed, I mean crushed. They lost areas that had never been in the conservatives' grip before. Now, the only thing Boris Johnson needed to do was find a way to solidify those gains. Because the moment that a person votes for the opposition or for another party, that is not a minor thing. That usually it takes a lot to get a person to say screw it and go and vote for the other party. It's one thing for them not to vote. It's another thing for them to vote for the other party. If that party can solidify that election, then that still holds true for them voting and going back. Meaning if you get somebody who votes for Trump and Trump solidifies that vote, it becomes a hard thing for that person to turn around and vote for the Democrat again in the next election. At least that's my hypothesis of it.
I agreed, particularly with the level of dysfunction for the Democratic Party. You know, it is. I've heard two things: black men are misogynists. That's why they wouldn't vote for Kamala. Latinos are they hate democracy. That's what Chuck Todd said. You know, they like a strong man, just like the country they came from. So the poor Democrats, their problem is they stood up for fairness and against sexism and against and for democracy. That's why they think about that. They lost because they stood up for democracy. Why'd you lose? Because we're the good guys. That's the best they got. You know, it's the narrative. We lost because we're the good guys. But isn't that also attack on their own voters? We lost because we're the good guys. Well, that kind of makes the voters the bad guys, doesn't it?
Well, and it's inherently problematic to take that point of view because that point of view is self-righteous. We are clearly good. We are clearly virtuous. It's these other people that are liars, that can't tell the truth, that are going against fact checking because they're liars. And Trump is a fascist. But we are virtuous. We are the ones who believe in human rights. And we believe in fairness. And we believe in all of these positive attributes that they ascribe to themselves, missing the fact that they lost. If you consistently put yourself in those terms, how can you ever change? How can you ever even see that there's a problem if you're so virtuous and you're so great in the way that you operate? And if you think about it, people like Uyghur, for example, Cenk Uyghur, who started to reach out to the left, or Anna Kasparian, who started to reach out to the right on their program, they got slaughtered for doing so. If nothing shows that you're in a cult, then the response by the cult members, the moment that you try to go outside the bounds of that cult, and they don't, it's like their framing of the world doesn't allow themselves to question themselves and to have any sort of autopsy. In fact, there's a clip by God, I believe that's his name, Eddie God on MSNBC, and he has this conniption fit about the way Democrats treat the left. I want to get your take on this because I do think he's right, even though, I don't know.
Guy's a piece of work.
Yeah, exactly. That's my
I heard
point.
him screaming about the misogynist and sexist black men who wouldn't vote for Kamala. But nonetheless, even a stop
Was it even a clock is right? A broken clock is right twice a day. So this is God being right on one once a day on this place.
And then you combine that with the DNA of the Democratic Party. It's always been the case, at least a part of the 20th century, where the Democrats try to hold off fascism on the one hand and hold off the communism on the other.
Yeah.
We got to hold off the right and we got to hold off progressivism. So what does it mean for Democrats who believe that they can just sit in the center in light of these extremes, in the midst of a second golden age, second gilded age, and not appeal to these populist energies, because they're always trying to, in some ways, marginalize the progressive wing of the party. Look what just happened to AOC, trying to silence Bernie Sanders and the like, right? Trying to blame the current state of the world on progressives, as it were gaslighting us in some way. So we're in this interesting moment where historical currents are colliding.
Give me your take on that. I mean, he's right that the Democratic Party does everything in their power to marginalize the left. I mean, they hate the left. And the reason they hate the left is pretty straightforward. If you look at them running around the country with Liz Cheney, for example, I think it's what Chuck, what is the guy's name?
Todd?
Chuck Schumer. I think it's what Chuck Schumer said. I think Chuck Schumer, it said the quiet part out loud, that for every progressive that you lose, you'll get this kind of Midwestern modern Republican. Now, this turned out to be nonsense, but it was wishful thinking. It was this what they wanted to happen, not necessarily what happened in fact. As I pointed out before, the Democratic Party usually raises more money than the Republican Party in presidential elections. Kamala Harris raised over $1.5 billion. You had Hillary Clinton raising like $1.3 billion. Obama was raising over $1 billion. And there's a legitimate question of, if you are able to raise that much money, who are you raising that much money from? And what do those people want for the money that they're giving you in exchange? Well, if you're going to the rich and you're saying, hey, we would like to pass Medicare for all. We would like to increase the amount that people are getting for wages, so we need to increase the minimum wage. We want to expand Social Security. We want to expand Medicare to include dental. And those people are going to say, well, we don't need college education. We can afford that. We're rich. We don't need healthcare. We can afford that. We're rich. We don't need these things that you progressives and lefties are asking about. We are already rich. We have those things. So if you're the Democratic Party and you have a large contingent of your group, let's say progressives, that want those things that other countries in Europe, for example, have, especially being the richest country on the planet. Okay, well, you don't, that's a pain in the ass for you. That's not something that you necessarily really want to push for, because the people who you need to push for those things don't want those things. And so if you could get a moderate Republican or let's say a Reagan Democrat, okay, then you have less pressure on you in the sense of your political space. You don't have to push and agitate for these things that progressives want. And so you're not stuck in this position of having to lie to a large number of your base about pretending that you want these things, when really you don't necessarily care about those things. The people you need to get money from don't care about those things. Meaning it's easier to try to get the moderate Republican, or it's easier to try to get the Reagan or the Joe Manchin type Democrat. So yeah, it makes all the sense in the world for them to take a political policy of marginalizing the left, their base, especially the people on the further left, and focus on these kind of woke issues, the trans bathrooms, or focusing on the trans surgeries, or focusing on this kind of social policy, as opposed to these kind of economic lefties that they know that the people in power and the people in positions of financial authority are not going to want. God is right in this, but I agree with you. He is just as bad as the people that he's complaining about right now in that clip. Give me your take on that. I'm sorry, I was long-winded on that. I was trying to.
No, that was great. That was an excellent evaluation. I would, and which since you really said a lot of important things that I agree with. So something else I'll add to that, and that is, he's setting up a narrative. But it's the narrative. The narrative is the Democrats are dead center. We're holding off fascism on the right. We're holding off communism on the left. We are dead center. It's right. We are the wisest, smartest of all. We're not extreme. Yep. Everybody else is extreme. We're fighting against the extremes because we're the center. Well, wait a minute. Can you get any further left than Netanyahu and Ben Gvir? I mean, right than Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, and Smotrich? You're trying to hold off the far right fascists. Oh, wait a minute. What about a bunch of guys goose stepping around with the iconography of the Third Reich tattooed all over him and a dog-eared copy of Mein Kampf in their backpack and running around Ukraine? Are you trying to hold off fascism there? So the reality is this: he's pretending we're trying to hold off fascism, but everywhere you look in the world, they're allied with fascism. Yep. So the policies, the foreign policy of the Biden administration does not in any way align with his arguments about the actual ideology of the Democratic Party. I would also argue this. Was it really that they were hugging up to the Cheney clan, right? The Bill Kristols. John Bolton wrote an article in support of Kamala Harris. Was it they're hugging up to them to try to get votes? Well, obviously that didn't get them no votes, and that wasn't going to work. Or was it simply these are the people that I'm allying and aligning myself with the people who I agree with on policy? You look at the policy of a Bolton, for the policies of a Bolton, the policies of a Biden, the policies of a Cheney, the policies of a Biden. They agreed on policy with these people. Yes. This wasn't really a game. It was an honest alignment. They attempted to realign the Democratic Party with these people, and a significant portion of the base didn't agree, and they paid that price. But those people are who they agree with. But he's still got to play the we're in the center crap that is out the window. Trump's more to the center than they are. And I'm not saying Trump's to the center, but he's got in people who are lifelong Democrats who left the Democratic Party. Oddly enough, both of them left to the left of the Democratic Party. Both of them opposed. Tulsi left because she wanted to go with Bernie, whose policies at that time were to the left of the party. They tried to rob, as they always do, RFK Jr. when he was running, and he was like, "Hey, come on, I'm opposed to the war." Some things that would be to the left of the party, he said, and they said no. And he has two people in his cabinet who is more aligned with you and I than they are with Joe Biden or with this guy Glaude or whatever his name is. So
they were Democrats.
Trump is more reasonable than they are.
Yeah,
which ain't saying much because he ain't the most reasonable guy in the world. But he's more reasonable than the Democrats right now.
I mean, they evicted both of these Democrats that Donald Trump effectively brought into his campaign. I mean, because if you remember, Kamala Harris, they hated her because she went to Syria. They hated her because she went after Hillary Clinton and the warmongers in the party. They couldn't stand it. She put a knife in Kamala Harris. They never forgave her for it. And so for them, she was persona non grata, just completely radioactive. RFK Jr., same thing. He criticized the vaccine stuff. And by the way, it wasn't even that he was lying about the vaccine. They just said it was malinformation, information they didn't necessarily like or they didn't find it convenient during the COVID.
If there was something that he said, they could have just refuted it. Anybody,
yes.
I'm a believer in free speech.
Yes.
And if he said, well, I think this about the vaccine, all they had to say was, well, here's the data, here's the evidence, here's whatever.
Like, that's not true. Here's the
if that's what they had, I mean, let people say what I don't think that everybody should have to agree. In fact, I think it's productive.
Yeah.
When
I agree with you. Because he can be wrong.
It says, I disagree with you, Garland and Jamal, you're wrong. And I think it would be great for Garland and Jamal to say, why don't the three of us all do a show together? And you can present your evidence. What's wrong with that? That doesn't mean you're a crazy person. Maybe it is, but a crazy person has a right to their point of view. And he doesn't look right now. I got to tell you this. He don't look as crazy as Blinken or Biden.
He doesn't. He does not. Man, Garland, God, I appreciated this, man. I always appreciate these conversations. You're right. He doesn't look as crazy as Blinken and Biden. And he made the right choice because now he's in a position of power. And he is, what's wild? He could have won that race, by the way.
He could have. If he'd have taken the right position on Israel, he could have won. He could have won.
I mean, like, if they would have had an actual primary. RFK Jr. was on that stage with any of the other candidates. Kamala Harris.
They'd actually had a debate. They couldn't have a debate. Remember? No debates. If they'd have had a debate during the primaries, everybody would have, they would have known then that Biden was done.
Yep.
And then it would have been him versus Kamala versus whoever, and he'd have had a chance. Because of the war thing, he'd have had a chance.
I think he would have had a damn good chance. I Yeah, I think he would have had a damn good chance. Garland, man, thank you for this. Garland Nixon, political analyst. You can catch his show on Garland Nixon. Is there a specific time that you come on? I always see your clips after the fact.
No, unfortunately I come on. I want to start. I may start doing like 10 o'clock and either noon or 1. You go off at 10, right?
I go up at 10. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm starting thinking about doing 10 o'clock because I don't want to clash with you. You know, every now and then I come on because I'm in a rush or whatever. But
Yeah.
I'm thinking about making it daily at 10 and then maybe 1 or 2. But you know, we're on for 2 o'clock Friday still, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes, that's going to be a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that, from my point of view, that's a standard thing that's in my calendar. If it even comes up, fair enough, but that's a standard thing in my calendar going forward. So yes, Garland and I will be on. I don't know. I think we named the show right now. Right now, it's just kind of.
It's just
it's like,
the
what's the name
weekly
of that dog?
wrap up, just news wrap up or something for now. Maybe we can come up with a name for it. That'd be fun.
News wrap up works because
Yeah.
that's what it is. It's like the in wrap up or something like that. But man, thank you for this, Garland. I always appreciate these conversations. I really do, man. Thank you.
It sounds good. Hey, I got to give you a buzz too, because I got to get you on my WPFW show too.
Oh, I'm down.
All right,
I'm down.
we'll talk. Maybe
Well,
this
you know,
Friday if you're available. Are you
but you
available
know I'm
this
down in
Friday at
Richmond.
6? Huh?
Well, you know I'm in Richmond now.
Yeah, that's fine.
So,
We can just do a
okay.
Skype. We can Skype.
Yeah, that
Good.
works.
So we'll talk. Maybe this Friday if you're available at 6.
What happens on Friday? I'll check it out. I'll see.
All right, yeah, we'll talk.
don't
We'll talk. We need to get you on there. We can have some fun on that show.
I don't think anything is available. I'll check on it. Yeah, we'll talk. We'll make we'll touch base. I mean, we're gonna see each other on Friday morning anyway.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you soon.
Have a good one, man. Be safe.
All righty. Bye.
All right. The one and only, the man himself, Garland Nixon. Always appreciate Garland joining me. He is